You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Monday, September 16th. The takes have been flying after the 49ers dropped their game in Minnesota, and we've got some thoughts of our own. Joining me, as always, on a Monday is Weston. Weston, we've had some time to digest what we saw, so how are you doing today, right now?
I'm doing all right, Steph. I mean, Victory Mondays are always more enjoyable than a non-Victory Monday, but it's not all doom and gloom. The sky isn't falling, but yeah, like losses hurt. When you're passionate about your team, it stings. I don't know what else to say about it.
That's exactly right. And I always hate after a loss when people try to say that we're being dramatic. It's like, what's the fun in being a fan if I can't be dramatic about a loss? Like that. If I'm going to be super dramatic about a win, I'm allowed to be dramatic about a loss as well. But I mean, we're also in the business of analysis, and with that comes some objectivity and some I guess wanting to give more context as to what we saw. And so we're going to try to do that as best as we can. Now, before we get into this game of week 2 for the 49ers, we do have to talk about some news that came in just an hour or two ago. This is pretty big for the 49ers. Deebo Samuel set to miss a couple of weeks with a calf strain that he suffered in the game against Minnesota yesterday. You guys might recall, if you guys watched it on TV, there was one play where Deebo did kind of get up a little limpy and walked slowly over to the sideline. He did return to the game after this, but it seems like today it probably didn't feel so great. So Deebo Samuel going to be missing a couple weeks. That is huge for this team, just given the fact that they're already missing Christian McCaffrey. As we know, Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve. It's looking like he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks, anywhere around that time. And Deebo Samuel now going to be missing a couple games with him. So 2 guys who are very important to how this offense operates, not going to be out there for the 49ers. That's pretty huge for this team.
Yeah, I'd say arguably the 2 most important in terms of what they try to do from, an offensive scheme standpoint. I know Deebo came back. I'm sure once the adrenaline wore off and, you woke up this morning, it was probably super, super sore. Right now, it's hard for me to trust any information that this organization releases regarding injuries, right? Like a couple. I know what a couple means in my world, you know what I mean? And in your world, Steph, but that doesn't seem to translate well to how the 49ers might define a couple of weeks. I think the reality here is you take a quick look at the schedule and you just say, hey, listen, I'd rather take these lumps early in the season, right? Get some of the younger guys some reps, like let's let the vets sit out, let's let them heal right. We've seen this team do it before, and you're here to make the push in the back half of the season towards the playoffs and get healthy and hot at the right time. That's how I'm going to choose to interpret this. But for all I know, based on the minimum information we get, and the Christian McCaffrey injury as an example here, hey, if there was a game tomorrow, a real game, I'd be playing, and here we are, maybe 4 to 6, missing at least 5 games to start the season on definition. For all I know, this could be another Achilles, or this could be a torn calf versus just a calf strain. I don't know, but I'm going to choose to use it as all right, before these things start to pile and we force Deebo out there in week 3 and then he misses 8 to 10 weeks, let's just shut it down now. That's the way that I'm going to interpret this move.
Yeah, I do admire your optimism because my first reaction, right, is as a fan, I can't help but think, man, so far this has a lot of 2020 vibes to it. And I hate to even put that out there because 2020 was so forgettable and I just want to forget it ever existed. But I mean, when you're thinking about some injuries, And an insult to injury, right? The 49ers lost this week 2 game. That I'm not as panicky about, but when you add on the fact that Christian McCaffrey is going to be out a couple of weeks, I do think Christian McCaffrey not being out there is a result of some of the things we saw out, on Sunday, or what we saw on Sunday was a result of Christian McCaffrey not being out there. And so for a player, like I said, that's as important as Christian McCaffrey is, like Debo, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence, but it's going to be up to Kyle Shanahan to adjust. And, again, we'll be talking about that throughout this week, but Weston, we do have a game to talk about, and that was the loss to the 49ers, to the Vikings. This one, what I've been seeing a lot today is people placing blame on certain things and also saying it's not fair to blame other things. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying you can't blame the defense because, this and this. And people saying you can't blame Brock Purdy because his receivers weren't getting open. You can't blame him because of the offensive line, and you got to blame Kyle Shanahan. And but you can't blame Kyle. Look, enough of that. Every single person, I think, had some kind of blame to have, or at least any positional unit, any coach also had some blame in all of this. I don't think there's anyone in a loss like this where it was really like all 3 phases that anyone's absolved of any criticism. Like, that's my main thing. And so, like, if I'm critiquing one thing, it doesn't mean that I don't also blame another thing. And I hate the word blame, but like I guess, like, for lack of a better word, I just mean like critiquing. But so it's been all over the place. And so that's just my main thing, that I think this was a full team loss in all 3 phases. I think there were a lot of things that it felt like a domino effect, right? Like the Christian McCaffrey effect, I think, in this game. But yeah, like what were your, takeaways from this one?
Well, I have to agree with what you're saying about like the blame game. I think in a loss, there always has to be, everybody's always searching for justification, and then everybody's interpretation of what they saw is going to be different, right? Like, was it the QB's fault? Was it the coach's fault? Was it the defense's fault? Like, we can go on. Was it injuries? We can go on and on down the list. The reality of Steph was they just stunk, and that happens. That's okay. Even the best teams in the world throw up duds. Nobody goes undefeated. I mean, this is a league of absolute parity. I say it all the time. You talk about stuff like styles make fights. This was, yes, on paper, Minnesota doesn't look like the top tier opponent or somebody who's going to steamroll through the NFC anytime soon. And we want to, clown Sam Darnold. But the truth is, they're a tough, physical, fast team that are well coached. And they're playing with house money. They don't have who's going to be their starting quarterback. That makes them dangerous. Their home opener. There's all these things. Like, this game to me just came down to execution in all 3 phases. I don't know if it was a game. Were there things throughout the game that were suspect to me in terms of like play call and approach? Yeah, 100%. But you still got to go out and execute it. Like the block punt. Yeah. Like, are we really blaming the coaches? No, the players, right? Like, the assignment, your responsibility, be there. Wide receivers not getting open. Well, guess what? Wide receivers, by definition, that's what you're supposed to do, right? It's just execution. 49ers executed poorly in all elements of the game. And I would say from the booth to the sideline to the field, it was just a poor performance. And I'm not excusing it, just saying that, like, we know it happens. And this is what's so mind-boggling to me about this team. It's like they go from a performance on Monday night that exceeded our expectations. Yes, here it's a short week. Let's give them that, right? It's as short as the week can get. You play a Monday night game, and now you got a 1:00 game on Sunday in the East Coast time zone. And they just put up a dud. They put up a stinker after looking so good, and then this. But to me, this was more. Some coaches just have your number, right? Like we say it about the 49ers and the Rams all the time, right? And we'll see what that looks like this coming week. But we just say, big brother, like, Kyle Shanahan owns Sean McVay. But you know what? Sean McVay owns a lot of coaches in the NFL and a lot of teams. Tough out. That's what it was. It was a tough out. This is still the NFL. That's why they call it, they say any given Sunday. Wasn't our Sunday. There's plenty of reasons why. My hope, being optimistic, is we can right some of the wrongs and try to get a W this week. Like, that's it. One game at a time.
So does this mean that Brian Flores owns Kyle Shanahan? Because it certainly feels that way in these last two matchups these two teams have had. And I don't know if you saw the clip, Weston, but you saw Brock Purdy after the game giving the handshake to Brian Flores, and he tells him, your scheme is crazy. Yeah. And it's the truth. I mean, I'm starting to kind of sift through the all 22, right? And like what they were doing, it's psycho stuff. Like, who even thinks of this stuff? Who does this? So yeah, obviously that was a factor. It was a huge factor in this game. And obviously I just think with the loss of Christian McCaffrey, it just amplified it. So again, like to your point, I don't think I'm making an excuse, right? Like obviously short week, like we can name a bunch of things, a bunch of factors, and none of them are excuses, but they are fact. Like they did play an impact in this game, and one of those being, like I said, the short week and all that on the road. Minnesota is obviously a really hard place to play. I heard it was really hot on the field too. It's a turf field, and it's kind of like a greenhouse because it is an enclosed field, but they do have the
glass ceiling,
the glass up top. So I guess anyone who was on the field did say that it was really hot down there, which could have impacted too. I mean, I don't know. They're, again, not excuses there, but small things that could lead to the bigger thing of why the 49ers looked the way they did. And like I said, I really do feel like it's a domino effect, and there's many factors to it, many layers to it. I think for me, like I put out a tweet earlier about Brock Purdy having one of the highest time to throws. It's like 2.9, I think, which is on the higher end, which tells me he has enough time. So like he is one of the more sacked quarterbacks in the league so far. I think he's the fourth highest. He's gotten sacked 8 times, and everyone thinks it's sacked that much. Oh, your offensive line. You know, like that's it. You guys suck. And yes, like obviously the offensive line isn't perfect. I'm not saying they suck, but like Trent Williams, for example, gave up a couple sacks in this game, and didn't look like he did in week 1. So we can blame that, right? That's one thing we can critique. But also the time to throw. Obviously, Brock Purdy has time to go through his progressions. And what that it's telling me that he's taking so long is the fact that when he does have time to throw, because the offensive line is giving him that time, but also he's not finding a play that he likes. He's not finding the guy he wants. And so he continues to go through his progressions and find someone open, whether that be because he's not pulling the trigger or because the guy's not getting open. It could be a couple of those things on any given play. Like on one play, it could be he didn't find anyone open. On another play, it could just be he didn't pull the trigger. So those are the things I'm saying. Like many different things happen, and it could all be part of the different factors I'm talking about. But it isn't just any one thing, right? So I think it needs to be better. I think Brock Purdy could stand to be better because I did see that in this game that he did have guys open. Like he had Jordan Mason as a check down option.
No, yeah.
And I know if he had Christian McCaffrey as a check down option, he'd be throwing it to him. But I don't know if maybe that he doesn't have the connection like that or the trust with Jordan Mason quite yet. But it just looked like Brock Purdy was looking for the downfield play, wasn't there. Sometimes it was as we saw, but other times it didn't really work out. And that's how we got into those third downs and then the Vikings could pin their ears back and do those crazy disguised coverages and blitzes and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a recipe, I think, for disaster, which is exactly what we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, lots to unpack. So yes, I do think Brian Flores owns Kyle Shanahan. I think I'm going all the way back to your initial comment. I just think he schematically is super aggressive, high risk, high reward. I think people talk about him as a defensive coordinator the same way people might talk about, Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay as like offensive coordinators or offensive minds, right? They're ahead of their time. There's a reason why Brian Flores has gotten head coaching consideration in this league and has been a head coach. Why he's no longer, that's a totally different story, but obviously his results speak for themselves. But the game, I agree with Brock being sacked at a high rate, holding the ball longer, not necessarily being the offensive line's fault entirely. Look, I thought the offensive line played significantly better against the Jets than they did the Vikings, just from my own eyes.
Yep.
But it's not like Brock was running for his life. There were times where I thought he stepped into pressure and didn't do a good enough job avoiding it. I think some of it is on the receivers, but I went back, watched, and saw that, like you, there were receivers running open in this field, right? So it's not the separation concern is not as large as it's probably being voiced right now. My bigger concern about all of this is if you have time and the receiver's there, what don't you trust, Brock, that you're not letting it rip? And now I'm wondering, is the stage getting a little bit larger for him because he's had all this success, right? And now all the conversation is, could he do it without the weapons? He's a byproduct of the system. If he was on any other team, he wouldn't be this guy, blah, 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 blah. They hear that. They know what people are thinking. And now as a player, do you think everything has to be perfect? Right? Go back to training camp. He threw a lot of picks in training camp, what they say. And I don't subscribe to that, but let's talk about it. Does that carry over because he's reluctant to make that throw because he knows how it turned out in preseason, right? In camp, where Fred or Demo or Jarvarius might have picked them off. And he's hesitant just to let it go because it hasn't seen successful reps like it did in years previous. So my bigger concern is like, I need to see Brock bounce back from this, and I need to see aggressive gunslinging Brock. With whether mistakes come from it or not, we've seen stronger results come than the negative results. But right now, there's a part of me that feels like he's playing timid, and he's playing to try to play towards perfection. And if you do that, you're going to get swallowed in this league like real fast.
Yeah, that's a good point because, even in week 1, this offense didn't look so hot, right?
No.
Like, yeah, I know they put up 32 points. 20 of those came from Moody. So yeah, I do wonder, it's a fair question to ask whether he is kind of in his head a little bit, because I think at this stage in his young career, like his 3rd season, right? Is his 3rd season?
3rd season.
I think at yeah, I know. I'm like, wait. I think at this
How old am
point,
I? Minus 12. Carry the 7.
Math isn't my strong suit. I think at this point, like, he wants to prove not just to himself but others that he's going to improve on last season. And we've already said it. Like, it would be so hard for him to improve statistically on what he did last season. Like, I don't think realistically we were expecting him to be better than he was last season statistically. I think we just wanted to see a maturity from him, right? But definitely don't want to see him force things, or, like I said, I think it seems like we both observed this, right? That he wasn't trying to take the short, easy stuff. Like, he did want to push the ball downfield, which I appreciate. Like, that was the thing we love about him in comparison to Jimmy Garoppolo, who he took over for, right? That was a stark difference. He pushed the ball downfield. He was aggressive. I like that. But there's a time and a place for that as well, in my opinion, because in a game like this, and also, it also reminded me of the game against the Ravens, because it was kind of similar. You get down by a certain amount of points and you're having a bad game, so you feel like you have to overcompensate a little bit. So you're trying to get a big chunk play to make up for all the other things that didn't go well. but that's not always how you get back in the game. Like sometimes you just need a chip away, right? And it just didn't seem like the 49ers were trying to do that, or maybe Brock Purdy wasn't trying to do that. And so in those situations, I think the mature thing to do, I think, as a quarterback is kind of recognize that and, just try to chip away, take what the defense gives you. Hey, if the big play isn't there, just take the check down. It's okay. If you don't trust it at that moment, hey, just take the check down. It's okay. Short completion is better than a long incompletion,
Yeah.
so it's kind of how I was saying it.
You make a great point, though. I actually, I was watching Bill Belichick talk on Pat McAfee's show today, and I don't know, or I had a little break in the day, and I just popped on the TV, and I was like, who doesn't want to listen to the GOAT coach? So I'm listening to him, and he made some very strong points about winning and losing a football game that I think are relevant. It wasn't talking about the 49ers in any case, right? He was just talking about football in general, but I think it's really relevant to the game on Sunday. And to your point that you're making right now, that it feels like when they get behind, because this team's not used to playing from behind, we knew, well, I don't even think Kyle Shanahan's used to playing from behind, because when he falls behind, like they don't have a great, come from behind record, if you will. But the reality is like, I think they do hit the panic button. And I think that's more of a reflection of the coach than it necessarily is the players, and maybe the urgency that's being stressed in the huddle, or dialing up like home run play calls when it's like, no, just get the first down. This is like a gambling addiction, right? You lose $10,000 on a bet, and then you're going to spend $100,000 trying to earn your $10,000 back and trying to hit home runs. It just doesn't happen that way. And Belichick's point, which is so true, is you don't worry about the score early in the game, right? Like, and he basically used the first half as an example. I'm not ever worried about the score. I'm just worried about the flow of the game. And it feels like we're controlling things. The score will take care of itself. And I would argue that the 49ers were, as bad as it looked, still controlling things, controlling the time of possession, leading the turnover battle. And then it just got like, all right, you go for it on fourth down. I loved it. Again, execution, no execution. But hey, now we know that Kyle Shanahan's never going to go for it on fourth down ever again because it didn't work out. But the truth is, like, love the aggressiveness. What's wrong with putting them, first and 10 on their own 1 yard line and have to go 99 yards? Well, it's a problem when on the second play they throw a 97-yard touchdown and you get beat, right? But even then, the game was still within reach. And then you just saw the game plan. Like, I saw it right out of the gate, but then it got too aggressive. Coming off of what you did on Monday night, knowing that you're like, you want to control the game, you want to control the clock, you want to keep your offense out there, you want to keep their offense off the field. Why are you not running the football on first down with a workhorse like that? You know what I mean? You just get behind the chains and then you become predictable as an offense. And this is the Christian McCaffrey effect here, especially on third down, because this offense has been piss poor on third down so far to start 2024. Is I don't care if it's Jordan Mason, whoever it is in the backfield, he's not a threat in the eyes of the defense. Whether he's open or not, he's not a threat. So now maybe you have 7 in coverage versus 6 in coverage, because Jordan Mason doesn't bring anybody closer to the line of scrimmage in the pass game. So now you less windows for the wide receivers, et cetera. When Christian McCaffrey's there and he's floating around 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, you better account for him, or it's a home run ball. It's just those little things that's, like you said, little things that add to the loss, just like little things add to a win throughout the course of the game. But I think they hit the panic button or the eject button or whatever you want to do almost too soon. Like, look at the Chiefs game. They were losing the majority of that game against Chiefs. Comes down to the last drive, kick a field goal, win the football game, right? Like, because it was in control and they kept the game close. And I just, the 49ers don't do that well. Like, I just feel like they panic when they fall behind and the wheels come off.
Yeah, 2 of 10 on third downs for the 49ers in week 2, and they weren't too much better than that in week 1 either. I'm trying to pull up what it actually was in week 1, but yeah, so definitely a problem. And I said I did appreciate that they did go for it on fourth down, because I do love the aggressiveness. And look, a lot of people talking about the play calling as well, especially on the third, fourth downs. But there were plays there. there were plays to be made. They were there.
Yep.
And either the Vikings had a better, defense for it, or I don't know, it just didn't work out for whatever reason on the particular play. But I'm like Van Ginkel, for example, he had the ball that he tipped, and Purdy was sure that he had a touchdown with Juwan Jennings there.
Yep.
And I believe, like, if that ball wasn't tipped, that probably is a touchdown. So again, you're talking about just like little things like that where changes our entire perception of the game and how it was called. Because like I said, everyone's kind of putting some blame on Kyle Shanahan. And again, that goes back to my other point. It's like Kyle Shanahan isn't absolved of any criticism either. Like I do think as far as the run game goes, I would have liked to see that a little bit more. I think it was one of those where he was trying to outsmart himself again. And I think he wanted to go into it passing because I think his thought probably going into it is, well, the Vikings are going to stack the box. Let's just start passing, getting some completions to show them that they don't need to worry about the run. And then when they're worried about the pass, we'll run it. Like, I don't know. That's just, that's how it looked like early on is what they were trying to do. And maybe it works. Like there's some games where that works for a little bit, right? But eventually you got to go back to what works. And Jordan Mason was looking good, man. He was looking good when they did run him. He averaged 5 yards a carry in this one. So I think as the game went on, they kind of realized that and did hand him the rock a bit more. But yeah, it's a lot of things. It's like, yeah, give credit to Brian Flores, give credit to this defense, give credit to the Vikings offense, because they looked a lot better than I gave them credit for. And I thought Sam Darnold was going to look, right? I hate to say he was throwing some seeds out there. And yeah, it's a lot of things. I'm not too worried about it. There are some things that in the first 2 weeks look like a theme. That I think is fair to be worried about, the third down stuff. I think on both sides of the ball. Yeah. Even the defense had a hard time getting off the field on third downs in the first 2 weeks of the season now. So I think that's an issue for both offense and defense this time.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've been saying this for a while, though, about their defense. It's like third down just seems to be a struggle, especially because they're so good on first and second down, right? Like a lot of these are third and longs. They're not, and when I say third and long, I mean like 3rd and 6 plus, right? Obvious passing downs, and they just can't get off the field. And I don't know if it's so much the DBs as it is the pressure, right? That the quarterbacks in the NFL, you give a quarterback enough time, somebody's open. I just don't, you know what I mean? Like somebody will get open, and all correctable things, though, Steph. All correctable things.
Right.
I do very much believe they have the right player. Well, for the most part, there's a couple that I could contest. I think they have the right players at the right positions. We can make every excuse in the book that, hey, these last few years have been very long seasons for them. These are very tired and beat up and worn down individuals. I think what stops the 49ers, if I'm being super optimistic, is if the injury bug continues to mount. I'll be more concerned if we're like, let's say we get to like week 7 and this team's like 2-5. But outside of that, I'm not worried about this is still the first quarter of the season, right? And most of us pegged the 49ers, myself, to probably lose at least 5 games this season. Well, there's one, right? Like there's one. And you know what? If they are who they think they are, if they are who we think they are, they can't just beat the crappy teams, right? They got to show up, and they got some real teams on their schedule this year. They got to smack them in the mouth, and because top flight competition. But luckily for them, the first 5 games on the schedule always seemed plausible that they could walk out 5-0. So if you walk out of there 4-2, 4-1, 3-2, like you're still on the plus side. And we've seen a lot of teams across the NFC right now that are top dogs that are struggling. But we're 2 weeks in. What do we know?
I think we always just wince a little bit when we think about the 49ers missing key guys, because when it happens, I think we kind of know what's coming next. Like the offense is going to look unrecognizable. And and they're not going to be able to get out of the rut that they're in. At least that's what we've seen in the
Yeah, of
past,
course.
like when Debo hasn't been there, and we haven't really had this many games or any at all really where Christian McCaffrey didn't play to know what that's like. But now you're thinking about Christian McCaffrey and Debo being out for these next few games. So that's the concern for me. I'm not panicking on the season, but for these next couple games, it is going to be a bit of a roller coaster, I think.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we get nervous that the big names aren't there. Obviously, we know what the team's record is without Debo Samuel, right? That's why I say how important he is, just the threat of who he is, even as a decoy. But I don't think there's any secret to winning these next 2 football games that are on the schedule. Play sound defense and run the heck out of the football, and you'll win both of these games, right? Like, you just got to play good defense. All this real easy for me to say, right? Like, far easier
I'm like, we
than
said
done.
this last week, Weston.
I know, but it's the truth. Like fundamental football, and players are gonna have to step up. They're gonna get their opportunity. Jacob Cowing, I'm looking at you, right? Like, you're gonna get an opportunity to catch some balls, make the most of it. Gosh, I really wish Ricky Pearsall was healthy, because this would be a great opportunity for him to get, valuable reps in a game. But that's just
to get out there, man.
A selfish wish. I hope D Winters is back on the field this week. I think that'll help the defense, because God, Devondre Campbell he just doesn't. I don't know why that was the move. I liked it, but now when I watch him on the field, he just doesn't fit what we do. Just looks out of place all the time. I don't know. Maybe it's whatever. I digress, but not the best football teams right now. I mean, listen, the Rams are hurting as bad as anybody in the league right now with injuries. You got to go in and you got to take out the wounded animal. Like that. You're wounded yourself, but you're not as wounded. Like, you got to take them down. You get the Patriots at home. I know they beat Cincinnati week 1. I'm not sold on Cincinnati just as a football team in general right now, but they're going to be a tough out. But another one, just play fundamental football, play the 49er way, run the ball, play defense, run the ball, play defense. Should be okay for the next 2 weeks, in my opinion. If Kyle doesn't outsmart himself, and he's going to try to do that for sure. Yeah,
well, in the live chat here, I did put a poll for our YouTube live viewers here, and I asked, who or what do you blame most for the 49ers loss to Vikings? 50% of you said Kyle Shanahan, 30% said defense, 10% for Brock Purdy, and 10% for the loss of CMC. So interesting how, everyone is kind of looking at this game and the results of it. But yeah, that's what it's looking like right now. And
was there an all the above option? Was there an E in the multiple
didn't have that many
questions?
options. I know someone too was like, "Do we have a Brennan Ayuk option?" And I'm like, and then technically, could we put Brian Flores in there too? Like, maybe that's to our point, right? Like, there's so many things you can blame this loss on. There isn't just one thing. But Weston, as we always do, and I know we say it's harder after a loss, but we're going to muster up some silver linings out of this game, because I actually think there were some clear ones in this one for me personally. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go first for this one.
Do it.
I'm going to go Fred Warner. Easiest one I could think of in a loss, right? 9 tackles. He had a sack. He had 2 pass breakups. Dude is just flying over the middle of the field. Like, he will throw his body around to make a play. He also had an interception, 2 forced fumbles. The one was on Aaron Jones, recovered by the defense. The second one, the 49ers didn't recover. It was on Sam Darnold. He was chasing him out of bounds, punched it out right before, but the ball went out of bounds, so it didn't matter or anything. And people probably forgetting about that one today. But let's not forget 2 forced fumbles in that game. So now up to 3 on the season. He's just playing like a madman out there. And after 2 weeks, he's PFF's highest graded player in the NFL with a 95.8 grade. And the eye test definitely shows that with Fred Warner. He's playing lights out. like maybe as good as he has ever played in his career so far through these first 2 games. And I'm just really, really thankful that the 49ers have him because, you were just talking about the loss of Dre Greenlaw, right? How do you overcome something like that? A guy who's so key for that defense. Well, Fred Warner helps. having a Fred Warner out there. Nick Bosa also said he's like a security blanket out there for him. Just knowing that anything that he misses or the defensive line misses, Fred's gonna clean it up for sure. So yeah, definitely gonna nominate Fred on this week.
Yeah, I mean, we said it last week and we just glowed about him, and glowed over him. But
yeah,
golly, it was just even more. Like I really think he's saying I want to be defensive player of the year. Like that's the way that he's playing in these first 2 weeks, and it's hard to argue. Sure. There's two better performances stacked on top of each other from a single player on offense or defense in this league right now. And what he does, if I'm being real with you, like he might be my only person on this list from this game. He was that good. Like he was out of control. I can't say anything that you haven't said already other than just like, yeah, Fred does it again. It'll be a real shame to waste this version of Fred if the team can't get it together.
Don't even say that. You're right. This version of Fred cannot be wasted on a season that doesn't end in a Super Bowl. I know. We got to do it for Fred. All right, Weston. Well, do it for Fred. I know you do it for Fred. I know you said that he might be your only 49K Player of the Week nominee here, but if you had to have another, who you got?
I go with Nick Bosa. Finally, getting that a couple things right. Like, was it super stat friendly for Nick? No, it very rarely is when you're getting choked by the offensive tackle in some of these games. But just to get into the double digit sack column, the multiple sack column, not double digit. I think that's just huge for his confidence, especially coming off of a down year. I would not boast the Minnesota offensive line to be terrible, and by any means. They're always a physical front up there. I thought he just, what was it? 2 sacks, right? A couple hurries, couple pressures, couple tackles, just kind of contribute every time. But his motor's just always moving. I think that's one of the things I love about Nick. He even got nicked up in this game, came back, which was nice because if you looked at the way his foot got wrapped up under him, that could have been really bad, really fast, and we'd be singing a different tune because I don't think there's much on that line coming from anybody outside of him right now. But it was a good game for Nick. I feel like if he can stack some more of these, maybe we get him back in that 14, 15, 16 sack number for the year, which bodes well for our defense.
Yeah, 5 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. I mean, this was the type of game I think we all expect and need out of Nick Bosa week in and week out, especially when, at times it feels like the pass rush still just a little stagnant. So Nick Bosa really needs to get them going as a group. So I think he did that in this game with the 2 sack performance. Hopefully we see more of those in the future, maybe as soon as next week. Sackaroonies, baby. All right. I do have one. Well, actually, I have 2 more. I'm going to say Deebo Samuel. He had 8 catches on 10 targets. I was most on the team. 110 yards, including a long of 28. In the rushing department, he wasn't as effective. He had 2 carries for -10 yards. But he was putting his body out on the line as well, just going after these balls that were way up. He had a high point in because Brock was trying to get it over the linebacker, and he came down with it every time. And one of those was at least a fingertip catch, right? And man, I mean, it just displayed real skill and will on those catches. So definitely gotta nominate Deebo Samuel on this one as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he played good wide receiver football, if that makes sense, right? Like contested catches, hospital balls, the big one on the sideline that got reviewed, all of that. One of the better, not a lot of yak, right? So this was more about like where you're catching the ball and just, more air yards on these plays. I would agree. I did have Debo on my list as well, but there's not much more from the offense. Well, there's one more, in my opinion.
Oh, who is that?
It's JP Mason, and I hope we
Yeah.
keep calling his name for the next few weeks. I mean, I'm not faulting this guy that he didn't touch the ball 30 times instead of 20 times. Too little for what he showed he's able. Here's what Kyle needs to understand is you ride this dude till the wheels come off and Christian McCaffrey comes back. That's what that's a point of an insurance policy, right? That's the reason why you have, in case it happens. It happened. So now you need to ride this guy. Don't worry about how many touches. Is he going to be here for the end of the year? Because we already know what this book reads. When Christian McCaffrey is back, if he's healthy, he doesn't come off the field. So Mason's not as valuable. And if McCaffrey's going to miss 6-8 games, well, I don't want to hear about rest if he's coming back like healthy. Like you just missed the first half of the season and didn't play in a preseason game, right? Like your body should be rested, recovered, etc. Like now you get 30 touches, but I would be coaching this to not. Sorry, Jordan Mason, that I'm saying this out loud, but I'm almost not worried about your long-term well-being. It's like I'm going to ride you until we can't ride you anymore. And listen, he'll do just fine with it. He's a really good running back. He's young. He's got his youth about him. He's big. He's physical. But I'm not. If something's wrong, if over the next 3-4 weeks he doesn't have 25 touches a game, it's a problem. It's an absolute problem, is my opinion.
I mean,
but Jordan Mason,
he's looking so good that it's starting to look very criminal that he was the third string running back. Like they had Elijah Mitchell over this guy and probably still would if Elijah Mitchell was healthy. Like that, based on what we've seen out of Jordan Mason so far in these first 2 games, he looks great. And I've said it before. I've said it so many times on the show that I think like Jordan Mason, like the issue with him not getting as many opportunities, I think, was the pass protection. He looked pretty good in that department on Sunday. So obviously that's something he's been working on. And hey, he answered the bell on Sunday in that department. So definitely love what Mason is doing. I agree. I think you just have to continue to give him carry. Like he can handle it. Like he has shown he can handle it through 2 weeks. You got to do it. I think Brock also has to start using him as an outlet, as a check down option, because I think he is an underrated pass catcher out of the backfield, and how tough of a runner he is. I think he's going to be able to get you some extra yardage even after the catch, right? I think we know that much. So yeah, definitely love this, and don't think it's the last time we're going to be nominating this kid for 49K Player of the Week. Those were all the nominees I had. How about you, Weston?
That's it.
All right, short list on a week of a loss. Who would have thought? But I think this is a great list, all things considered. So now let's go ahead and let you guys vote on these. I'm going to put the names up on the screen for our nominees. We have Fred Warner, we have Nick Bosa, we have Deebo Samuel, and we have Jordan Mason. And as always, with 49K Player of the Week, I literally just forgot what I was going to say. Make sure in the live chat you put your votes, and in the meantime, me and Weston are going to give some honorable mentions and put some players on notice. For an honorable mention, I'm gonna say George Kittle. I mean, 7 catches, 76 yards, a touchdown. It's another day at the office for Kittle, and his 100th game in the NFL. He passed who was it? Winslow for third in receiving yards by tight end in his first 100 games, and also he passed Rob Gronkowski for fifth in receptions by a tight end in his first 100 games of his NFL career. So congrats to Kittle. Sorry we lost, but that's a hell of a feat for him.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. For me, obviously he had minimal production in week 1. Made a couple nice catches himself. I still can't believe he didn't get into the end zone on that one where he caught it at the goal line. I still don't even know how
crazy
physics makes that not work. Is what it is. But my biggest concern with Kittle is now with the superstars, Debo and CMC and these guys banged up, he can't disappear. And I know I'm sitting here saying, okay, pound the ball. And to pound the ball effectively, George Kittle needs to be part of the blocking game, right? That's what he does unequivocally better than any tight end in the National Football League, is he being a 6th offensive lineman. But he has to continue to remain involved in his passing game. You're down one weapon. He's a mismatch against all linebackers, most safeties. You got to find ways to get the ball in his hand and leading and giving him a full head of steam upfield, because he's even harder to bring down. And you want to take the will from some of these DBs. They don't want to tackle George Kittle running through. But yeah, I thought he played a hell of a game, at least offensively. I just want to make sure that he doesn't disappear from the game plan over the next 3 or 4 weeks, because this is when he's going to be needed more than ever.
Tell Kyle, man.
I've been texting him, but he don't text nobody back. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I really don't think, I was thinking to myself heading into this game that George Kittle probably wasn't going to get the receptions that he needed or yards to pass both of the, the things we just talked about.
Yep.
Just because he doesn't always get a lot of involvement. Even he'll have crazy stat lines where he has 2 touchdowns, but 2 yards and on 2 catches, weird stat lines like that. He doesn't always get peppered with targets, but it kind of felt like a necessity in this game. I don't think it was part of the game plan really to have Kittle have all this involvement. I think it just sort of happened naturally that way. And I think just out of necessity, it's going to have to happen again. I don't think there is any disappearing when you're missing Christian McCaffrey and you're missing Deebo Samuel. There's going to be more on George Kittle's shoulders these next couple of weeks. And yeah, he is going to have to answer the bell, which he often does if he does get targeted.
No.
So hopefully Brock is looking his way too, because I think also in this game, Kittle showed that even if he looks like he's covered, just put in a spot where just he can get it. He can shield the defender from the ball with his body. He did that a couple times in this game, which I thought was pretty impressive. So just feed him, and I think things will go well for the 49ers. But
I think what bothers me the most, Steph, about that statement is because you're right, and it's out of necessity, right? The usage is out of necessity. Why? For a guy who once upon a time was the only receiving threat this football team had under this leadership. Once upon a time had 1,300 yards of receiving.
Yeah.
Why is that out of necessity? Some of the best offenses that I can remember, the high power Atlanta offense that Kyle ran with Tony Gonzalez as your tight end, who was an old man at the time, still putting up crazy statistics, right? Good offenses, high-powered offenses still funnel through the tight end. They're every quarterback safety blanket. But I'm saying this to agree with you. George is not out of necessity. He should be part of the X's and O's in the game plan. You know what I mean? He's not an adjustment. He's a focal point, in my opinion.
And I find myself, and I literally did it throughout the show, I find myself saying, man, it's going to be so tough without Christian McCaffrey. and Debo. Like there was a time where this team didn't have Christian McCaffrey, and they were still like rolling over teams.
Still played
Like,
in the NFC Championship game. You
exactly.
know
So
what I
I'm like,
mean?
why do I even say these
With Jimmy
things out loud?
Garoppolo as their
Like,
quarterback.
exactly. Why am I making these kind of excuses, right? Like,
Yeah.
you still have George Kittle, you still have Brandon Ayuk, who you paid handsomely. And by the way, all the people talking about Brandon Ayuk and blaming him, the target in the end zone, had Brock Purdy thrown that earlier, and it wasn't his fault that he didn't throw it earlier. He was waiting for a defender to kind of like move out of the vicinity. Had he thrown it earlier though, that is a touchdown to Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
And then we're not saying anything about Brandon Ayuk. We're saying, hey, like welcome back. Like he was getting open in this game. But like I said, there were many other factors than just the one thing, and on any given play. So I just wanted to say that really quickly. But did you have anyone that you wanted to put on notice?
Yeah, I
Wes?
do actually, and I'm very
Who's it?
eager about this, and it's
Oh,
not going to be agreed with, but Charvarius Ward. And you're
ooh,
going to say, "What? You're crazy!" Like
no.
I
I've
know
seen a
what
lot
the
of people say
man, I
this.
know what the man does and is capable of in coverage.
We
Get
saw it in
all of
week
that.
1.
Dude's elite. You know what he
Yeah.
doesn't do, Steph, and has zero interest in doing, and it is so he don't want to tackle anybody. He doesn't want to be near that football. I saw like just like I don't want to say walking. I would never say that, but like disinterested when the play was coming to that side, like that's not 49er defense football. 49er defense football is everybody's taking a swing at the ball. Everybody, like whether it's the Greenlaw left hook that I swear he's going to get injected from a game from one time because he throws it so hard. Demo comes up and wants to hit everybody he can. Brown, Hufunga, they want to come lay with. It's about just putting your body in there and playing with a little bit of like reckless abandonment. And I know Dion changed everything for corners back in the day when he said, I don't tackle because that's a business decision. That's not what I get paid to do. I get all of that, but like you got to be willing, and I'm sorry, I don't see that from Charvarius Ward. He doesn't show me anything that he wants to be in the mix other than he just wants to cover people. Like that's all he wants to do. And yeah, that's part of the position, but like everybody needs to contribute, right? Like, and some of that's coming up, tackle. Even if you're not interested in putting your shoulder in there, come up from behind and punch the ball, make a play, force a fumble.
Yeah,
Don't just let it
something.
like go back and watch Steph when you do watch the 22 and focus on Charvarius. Like you will literally see him walking after the ball, like not like just no urgency to get in there whatsoever. And then he wants to talk afterwards about, hey, I'm best when I follow the number one receiver. Well, pardon me. Maybe this is the boomer in me, Steph.
Was that
Like,
his protest?
you got to earn the right, dude. You know what I mean? Like you got to earn the right. And that's doing everything that we ask you to do out there. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of everything that was wrong with the defense, like to end the season, right?
Yeah.
Like in the like at the end of the regular season and into the playoffs, that was a major issue where it kind of felt like defenders were waiting for the guy next to them to make the play. Oh, he's got it. I don't have to worry about it because he's got it. And then they wouldn't get it. And then it's like, oh, you're kind of screwed. So yeah, that's a good one. And you're not the first person I saw, saying that about Mooney in this game. Okay, my player that I got to put on notice really quickly. Get your votes in, people, for 49K Player of the Week. Names are up on the screen. And as I get this last one off here, it's not really someone I'm putting on notice, but it seems like the 49ers maybe putting him on notice. George Odom. He was in this game. He started just like he did in week 1. He was on coverage on Justin Jefferson on the 97-yard touchdown, which for one, I don't know why. He's literally like covering him in the slot. That was odd. No shit. Like your safety's gonna get burned by the best wide receiver in the league if you have him lined up across from him. Jair Brown, that's a different story, but it's not the one I'm putting on notice, or the 49ers are putting on notice today. He got benched. He got benched after that. Or at least that's what it seemed, right? Because then we see Malik Mustafa, the rookie, in there in his place, playing safety, and he finished out the game.
Yep.
And so it seemed very coincidental for the 49ers to then say, like, oh, yeah, like, we just want to get him reps. And, like, you know, like, we just want to see him out there, all this stuff. It seemed very coincidental for that to happen after the Justin Jefferson play. It kind of felt very scapegoatish at that moment, maybe a little reactionary. I don't know. Again, I think the bigger question on that play should have been, why is George Odom lined up across from Justin Jefferson in the first place? But I digress.
I don't know how to feel about it. Like, part of me is excited and hope that the instituted change remains, because I think somebody like Mustafa, the more reps he gets, especially early in the season, the more there's more upside to him than there is George Odom, right? Like, in my particular opinion. And we'll see what that looks like when Huff comes back. I'm sure there's a little bit of scapegoat. I wonder if it doesn't have any, and I'm purely speculating here, anything to do with like what his reaction on the sideline might have been to players and coaches being like, you blew that. If he came back and was like, no, I didn't, that was your assignment, blah, 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 and didn't understand the coverage, then I got to get that guy out, right? Because that means that's going to happen again. So obviously we'll never know that, right? Like, no coach is ever going to come out and like, he blew the assignment, that's why we yanked him, right? They just don't talk that way in the league. But I think it's a combination of probably blew it and maybe didn't even know, right? Like, I don't know. What do I?
Yeah, I mean,
know
no,
nothing,
it's good speculation for sure.
But I think I've been honest about this the entire time. Is like, I'd rather Mustafa be in there right now and learn on the fly than a vet who has a halfway decent ceiling, you know what I mean, and a low floor, versus a guy like Mustafa who, you know, when I was just talking about physicality and tackling, like, I know he's not afraid. He's going to stick his nose in that business all day long. And maybe another tone setter outside of Fred is maybe just what this defense needs.
Yeah, and it might not be too much longer until Talanoa Hufanga plays. The 49ers do play on a turf field next against the Rams, but it seems like the door is open just ever so slightly for Hufanga to make his return in that game. Weston, before we head out of here, who is your vote for 49K Player of the Week 2?
All-Pro Fred.
We've got a unanimous 49K Player of the Week, the first one of the 2024 season, Mr. Fred Warner. Easiest decision of our lives with that one. Very much deserved. Thank you so much to everyone that tuned in. You could have been anywhere in the world, but including watching Monday Night Football, but you decided to be here with us. Really appreciate that. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. Weston, thank you so much for joining me, as always, on a Monday. Have a good rest of your Monday, folks. It will get better. All right? I think. Peace.